Hello and welcome back to another edition of Python Medici. This time we are going to explore files, which is well and truly getting into the data territory. But before we get there, let me thank you all for all the support I have received so far. We will continue to make such great videos that help you to learn Python step by step in short chunks. So let's get into the session for today. Now let's look at our objective for today. We will be doing some interesting stuff in this session like we have always done in the past. We are going to import a library. Python comes with a great number of libraries, both built-in and those provided by other developers like you and me. Some of them organizations, some of them are individual contributors like you and me. So let's jump into one of the default libraries which is available called OS. As you all know, OS will stand for operating system. This allows you to deal with the operating system. Now let's just do a very basic process here. If you look at the code, it says import OS. So the import statement allows you to bring in a library into your current code. Even though it's a default library, you need to import them. There are a great number of default libraries, so all are not required. Therefore, you need to import the first one. Right. So now that we have got this library, let's see what is our current directory. And that is this far, right? We got CWD is current working directory. So we are asking the operating system, please get the current working directory, and it returns for this program what this current working directory is. Mind you, you are still running the code in the browser, which means you are doing it in colab and you really don't know what that directory really is. So let's try to ask colab what the current directory is. And we will open a file called sample.txt, which we have pre-created here. If I were to double click this, it has got this text which says hello, and let me run that. So as you can see, this content is printed. Let me just type the text world. Well, what is programming without a hello world in any case? So let's get into this one. So as you can see, it printed hello as the first line and then it printed world. So this is what we did here, right? So we opened a file. What is a file? File is called sample.txt. It already exists, and that file we read in. So this object called file is the handle, or by what you would refer to the file itself. Let's just change that variable to txt and let's see what happens. So some of you who have come from a programming language where there's each keyword, it can create a confusion. So just to avoid that, let's see this part of it, right? So what we did is we read one line at a time. Right, like we just created a third line and we saved it, right? We double click this file and we open here. That's what it does. So that's a new lesson on Google Colab in any case. So we run it and you see the third line is also printed. So it's very truly this particular file. So what we have done right now is we have read a file. Now reading a file is a basic process. Now, let's assume tomorrow you are analyzing data which came from sales of a certain e-commerce store, or let's say you are calculating how effective a certain drug is, or you are calculating how effective a certain process is. Some data which you got from a third party, you were trying to read it, you still need to open the file and read it. So that is the first step. So this particular lesson is very important as we go towards data processing. There are other ways to open files, there are smarter ways to do it, and we will do that. But understand basically what you are doing is opening and reading. Files are, when you give this file name here, which is here, R means I need to be able to read this file, right? So there are different modes in which you can open a file, which we'll talk about in a bit. Now that you understood this is a file, so this is a read-only file which is being given to us, right? There can be another file which is trying to write to it. Let's say another file writes to it. If a file is reading it, it knows that it does not read to write, so there is no conflict in terms of read and write. But at the very same second, it can create a little bit of a confusion. But let's not talk about that for now. You would have already seen that in many programming languages. So to keep it very simple, we have read a file and processed the output. So what was our goal? The goal was to be able to read a file and display its contents. So you could be doing any other kind of processing. For example, if I wanted to append a text, let's just say I want to append a text for every line, right? This is a hypothetical situation. I make that an F string, and I tell the F string that I want to say line is, right? So our formatted string, or the F string, now shows us it just keeps on saying line is. Let's just put a colon there to give the separator. So now we know that this loop is processing every single line. The file is in read mode. Now let's just make this a little bit more interesting. You see this particular sample data folder. This is provided to you by Colab itself. And what you could do is, like we have the OS, there is a third-party library which is available to you called Google Colab, right? And in Google Colab, it allows you to work with your data in your Google Drive. So when you try to connect it by clicking this, it will ask you for certain permissions. Once you give those permissions, this drive is available, right? For now, let's just stick to this. Let me just show you how that works. So we have got that particular drive, right? So because I ran it before, it says it's already mounted, right? So you can always unmount it. So mounting is primarily the process of taking the content and making it available at some location on your disk, right? So this is Google Drive is treated as a separate drive. It's like a USB, but except it's on the cloud. So it allows you to access your Google Drive as a cloud. Now, if you get data for your projects, or if you are a data scientist or a budding data scientist trying to analyze data, you may push that data onto your company's Google Drive. I would not recommend that you use your own drive because of data privacy reasons and all those things. So once you get past that, you could actually mount the drive and read from that. Okay, now let's just go into this part. If you see this part, we said here we ran a for loop. Now here we did a bulk read. We read all lines of the content. So this is how you would read one line of the file at a time, while this is how you will read all the file at one go, and that is made available to you with the file.read. I hope you are being able to distinguish between both the processes. Now let's quickly jump into the different modes in which you can read a file, right? Or read or write a file for that matter. R means read, W means write, A is append mode. It adds to an existing file. If the file does not exist, it just creates a new one. The write mode also creates a file if it does not exist. All right, so now you have the binary mode, which is B, which is you're reading things like Excel files, or you're trying to read a JPG or a PNG, which are ones and zeros essentially. not human readable. For those files, you use B. If it's a text file, you can use T. Here in the X mode, it's like write, but that's a small difference. And here it does one thing. If it's already existing, it will fail. So it gives you that exclusivity or control over the file. Now R plus is a read and write mode, just like W plus. In the R plus, the file must exist. In the W plus, the file will get created if it does not exist. And the A plus is in append mode. It'll create a new file if it doesn't exist. So that is in an append mode. So what you do is whatever write you do thereafter to that file, it will happen to the bottom of the file, right? All right, let's jump back into right now you are looking at the read process, and let's jump into the write process. So again, now in this case we are using a with, right? In this case, file becomes a handle which is provided to you, something like this. So it just pretty much does that and gives it to you. That's another way of doing it. In W mode, like we just saw, if you open a file, this is some dummy file, okay? And let's call it as dummy file. No exist, right? So it does not exist here, as you can see. Let me refresh and prove that to you. So right now it does not exist, right? Dummy file now exists. So I'm going to run execute on this. So it did the read as we did the past, but look at this, a new file appeared because this file was opened in a write mode and it just created the file. So whenever you open and you write to a file, it needs to be in some kind of a write mode, and then whatever gets written. So if you can see that when you double click that file, it turned up here on your right hand side. So now you can see how the file is created, and you could see that it was created by the write operation. You essentially still didn't open here, but isn't write. Note here, I opened an existing file. I have not given a mode. All right, so what we saw so far is how to read file, how to write a file, and what are the different modes, how you could read a file line by line and all at once, and what would happen, and how you would create a new file by simply writing content to it in the W mode. So we also saw the different modes. We will continue on the different modes in the coming session, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this particular session, and see you in the next one.